Arsenal have won their first Premier League game of the season, beating Championship champions Coventry City 3-0 and handing Frank Lampard his first loss of the season. It was a one-sided game that showed the gap in class between a Premier League side and a Championship one. Arsenal held Coventry to a miserable 0.20 xG, limiting them to just 4 shots in total with only 1 on target, while Arsenal took 20 shots, 6 on target, and scored 3 of them. The underlying numbers back up what our eyes told us. Arsenal dominated the ball for long spells, strung together far longer passing sequences, and rarely looked troubled once they'd worked through Coventry's opening press. Let's start with the lineups. Arsenal lined up in a 4-3-3, and newcomers Coventry also set up in a 4-3-3, with Grimes anchoring the base of midfield alongside a partner, and Sims leading the line alone up top. Before we get into the tactical analysis, quick heads up. The channel is running an FPL mini-league this season, and the winner takes home $100. If you're interested, the link's in the description. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and drop a comment. Let me know what you think of the analysis, and whether you reckon Arsenal can defend their title. Now let's get into what Coventry did with the ball. When Coventry had possession, they tried to play like a big club. Instead of going long straight away, they looked to build out from the back. During build-up, goalkeeper Rushworth dropped into the defensive line, which let Coventry's fullbacks push higher up the pitch, turning their 4-3-3 into a 3-2-5-1. On paper, it was a smart idea. With a bank of 5 players ahead of the back 3 and Sims up top, it should have stretched Arsenal's midfield and defensive lines and opened up gaps for their wide players and the 2/8s to exploit. It also isolates Arsenal's front 3 against a back 3 plus keeper in the first phase, which usually gives the side in possession a numerical edge to play through. That's the theory anyway. But the execution let them down. Their center-back spread too wide, as you can see in this frame. The gap between center-back Bobby Thomas and the goalkeeper was around 23 meters, which is miles too far for a clean line-breaking pass under any pressure. That made any pass from Rushworth into Thomas risky on its own, and Havertz's positioning made it worse. His presence alone threatened the passing lane to Thomas, while also cutting off the route into Coventry midfielder Matt Grimes. With that lane closed and the switch to the other side too far to execute cleanly, Rushworth's only real option most of the time was long. And because that spacing did the pressing for them, Arsenal didn't need to commit numbers to the first line. Havertz alone, with intelligent cover shadow, was enough to force the issue. That let Arsenal keep Rice and Lewis Skelly central, ready to squeeze the second Coventry's midfield tried to receive, instead of dragging them out of position to help with the initial press. It forced Coventry into long balls, which Arsenal's backline dealt with comfortably. Gabriel and Mosquera won the vast majority of their aerial duels, and Coventry never really threatened in behind because Sims had no support once the ball went long. He was often isolated against 2 center-backs with nobody arriving from midfield to pick up the scraps. When Arsenal had the ball, they also built out from the back with a 3. But unlike Coventry, they didn't form it with goalkeeper Raya. Instead, the back 3 was Ben White, Christian Mosquera, and Gabriel, with Calafiori given license to push into the left half space. In midfield, Rice and Lewis Skelly formed the double pivot, while Odegaard moved into the right half space, shifting Arsenal from a 4-3-3 into a 3-2-4-1. With Saka and Tzolis holding the width and Havertz playing as the number 9. This kind of asymmetric build is something we've seen from Arteta before. Keep White tucked in as an auxiliary center-back for cover on the counter, while Calafiori's more progressive passing and dribbling get used higher up the pitch on the opposite side. It gives Arsenal 2 different ways to break lines. White's calmness in possession from a back 3 role, and Calafiori's willingness to carry the ball into midfield. Coventry, for their part, tried to stop Arsenal's build-up with a 4-4-2 mid-block. They chose not to press Arsenal's back line and instead looked to control the central areas, picking up Rice and Lewis Skelly with man-oriented marking to make any pass into them risky. They also looked to man-mark Calafiori and Odegaard in the half spaces, as you can see here, with Rice and Skelly closely shadowed by Sims and Loum Chauna. The idea was sound in theory. Deny the central pivot, force Arsenal wide, defend the width with numbers. But it left their 2 center mids a lot of ground to cover, especially once Arsenal started rotating positions, and it meant Coventry's front 2 were doing more running than pressing, chasing shadows instead of actually winning the ball back. To get around this, Arteta had one of his pivots drop into the defensive line so Ben White could push into the wide space. Here you can see Lewis Skelly drop back while White pushes wide and high. That put Coventry in a bind. Press White or leave him free to receive. Crucially, none of Coventry's front two or wide players were positioned to press him without opening a lane somewhere else, so this wasn't really a choice at all. It was Arsenal manufacturing a free man by design. It was a genuine double-edged sword. Press White and it opened central space for a line-breaking pass into Rice, Odegaard, Calafiori, or Tzolis dropping into the half space. Leave him alone and White could simply receive and bypass Coventry's first line of pressure entirely. That's exactly how Arsenal got their first goal. White receives in space and immediately looks for Tzolis on the left wing with a long, driven pass. The kind of ball that only really works because White had so much time and so little pressure on him. Tzolis loses the first duel but presses immediately, wins the ball back within a few seconds, and slides it into Calafiori in the half space, who squares it first time for Havertz to finish inside the box. Just like that, Arsenal manufacture a goal from almost nothing. Remember that name, Tzolis, because we'll come back to him. The second and third goals followed a similar pattern. Arsenal working Coventry's mid-block into a compromised shape before taking the chance. But it's the build-up to the first that best captures how they did it all game. It's also worth looking at what Arsenal did without the ball, because a back three in possession only works if the rest defense behind it is solid. Whenever Arsenal lost the ball during their own build-up, White, Mosquera, and Gabriel were already positioned to deal with the counter, with Rice dropping into the space directly in front of them to cut off the first pass forward. That meant Coventry's rare moments of winning the ball back never really turned into transitions. Sims had no space to run into, and Coventry's wide players were too advanced to support a counterattack even when they did regain possession. Higher up the pitch, Arsenal's front three and Odegaard counter-pressed aggressively the moment the ball was lost, which is a big part of why Coventry's 4 shots came almost entirely from deep, low-quality positions rather than genuine transition moments. When Arsenal advanced into the final third, they attacked through the wide areas while also flooding the middle of the pitch, building passing triangles out wide and consistently working cutbacks into the box. On the right, Saka, White, and Odegaard often formed that triangle, using quick combinations to get White or Saka in behind Coventry's fullback. On the left, it was Tzolis, Calafiori, and Skelly, who leaned more on Calafiori's underlapping runs into the box to get numbers in the 6-yard area for cutbacks. But these roles weren't fixed. We saw plenty of rotation, with Calafiori staying wide and Tzolis tucking into the half space, and Saka and White doing the same on the right. That rotation is what made Coventry's job so difficult. Their fullbacks and wide midfielders constantly had to decide whether to follow their man or hold their zone, and more often than not, they got caught between the two. Tzolis is my player of the match. He was everywhere, attacking and defending, creating the most shots, taking the most shots, and racking up the most touches in the opposition half. Beyond the raw numbers, he was also Arsenal's most direct outlet, the player most willing to run at a fullback one-on-one, and the one who won the ball back highest up the pitch whenever Arsenal did lose it. That's a great sign for Arsenal, because it means they won't have to lean on Saka to carry the entire attacking burden. To wrap things up, Coventry's defending on the day wasn't good enough, and that's something Lampard is going to have to look into before their next test. The spacing issues we saw in their build-up were a big part of why Arsenal's front three had it so easy all afternoon, and a backline that gets stretched that easily against a mid-table Premier League side will get punished far worse against the league's better attacks. But that shouldn't take anything away from Arsenal. However open Coventry left themselves, Arsenal still had to find those pockets, play the passes, and put the chances away, and they did all three with ease. This was a genuine statement performance to open their season.